It's time to welcome Patrick Hutchinson to the Daily Brief, and the subject matter we're going to talk about is the challenge that's facing our farmers right across the nation. They're struggling, I think, with the worst drought in living history, but there's much more to this story. And Patrick, welcome to the Daily Brief.
Thank you,
Where do
George.
we start?
Well, I think we start, George, actually beyond the farm gate. So we are only now seeing the depressed prices for cattle, certainly in the last couple of weeks. But what we have seen is since probably at its peak in August of 2017, we've saw absolute record prices. At that time, there was also the beginnings of the drought, and essentially the guys who are buying that livestock were paying those prices. They want to pay higher prices because it allows farmers to reinvest back into their farms. But essentially what we've also got is then record labour cost, record energy cost, and an increasing regulatory burden.
And it seems to me that instead of helping our farmers and this particular challenge that faces them, we keep throwing things up to impede them. We're contemplating changes now to the way we bring outside workers in. We're putting restrictions on who they can be and just how qualified they can be. That must add another impost to the farmer and to the man in the land who's going, where do I go next?
I think certainly for farmers, what they're hopefully concerned about is in fact that the processor that they sell their livestock to, currently 1/3 of them are operating at 80% or less capacity. And one of the biggest reasons for that is the two L's, livestock and labour.
Ouch.
Now we know with livestock, certainly it's the drought, but secondly it's labour. And we've already heard today that the federal government is now putting a cap on migration, which in turn puts added pressure on the areas that actually need this type of labour. We need overseas migration, we need temporary workers to ensure that we can build up our workforce and a continuity. So essentially those sorts of things that potentially a Conservative government may look at as being a real vote winner, essentially is going to be almost short term is being too long for them. This is the minute term, because essentially what's going to happen is that the farmers who are thinking, or potentially Conservative governments who believe that this is a vote winner, when farmers can't sell livestock to processors because they're only operating 2 days a week or are closed down altogether, then I think that sort of that rhetoric's going to change and change quickly.
We've got a federal election coming up. We've got state elections within a week. You would have thought the gamekeepers, the stakeholders, the people who make a difference would be talking to you almost daily to try and find a way past the impasse.
Essentially what we're seeing is, again, coming up to a state election in New South Wales, coming up to a federal election in Australia, the viewpoint is votes. And essentially when we look at votes, people believe that votes are with farmers. The thing that I would be saying to the government is something very clear. We feed people. Farmers provide us product, but we feed them. So if you're not looking to help us feed people, then what are you investing in?
What's the Labor Party doing? Have they put out a platform that will mean something positive? Can you see that their policy understands your dilemma and is addressing it or going some way down the path? And equally, what's the federal government doing?
I think firstly around the Federal Labor Party, yes, they have put out a discussion paper, a 15-page discussion paper on the red meat industry, as they should.
If they want to be seen as a credible alternative government, they need to be doing it.
Well, most
they need
definitely.
to be stepping out.
And more importantly, George, anyone should, because essentially we are a 20 billion plus industry. Alone, standing there. We are the second largest manufacturer and the largest trade exposed manufacturer. The key consideration we've got to remember is that what people don't get is that we take a whole and create parts and sell that. Not take parts and then create a whole and sell that.
That's right.
Manufacturing we are a manufacturer. We're the biggest.
The ultimate processor.
Correct. And so what's occurring now is that there's a stumbling block where there's blindness about farmer and farmer only. We are the biggest supporter of farmers more than anybody else because they supply us the raw material, of course. We want them to be functional, we want them to be efficient, and we want them to be there with us on the journey. The unfortunate thing is that when we look at drought as an example, we've seen governments who just pour billions into drought aid, which is fine, but if you're only putting all your eggs in one basket at the end, and at the other end there's nothing, it tips.
Absolutely.
And then you then try to figure out why has it all crashed.
To think that here we are all these years down the track, instead of being so much better prepared, we seem to be at odds and incapable of understanding the challenge. Is it denial?
I think it's more, again, it's a populist, fast-moving structure at the moment with government, with policy making on the run in a lot of circumstances. I think that what we're seeing actually is not a recognition of the rest of that supply chain. You go back to the processing facility, it's seeing mass energy consumption and of course an increase in price. And if we look at around the world, I mean, we are paying well over double in energy costs than the US are doing, or Argentina, our two biggest export competitors.
I was going to say, how are they meeting the energy costs overseas?
I think that there's different ways in which they do it. There's heavier regulation over there. If I look at Brazil, obviously huge sugarcane producer, so there's a lot of ethanol that goes into process, but their costs are still high, interestingly enough, almost on par with us. But the one that frightens me the most is that our biggest sheep meat competitor globally, of course, is New Zealand. New Zealand, as a net energy importer, is paying less at a processing facility for energy than Australia as a net energy exporter. How did that happen? It's being loaded with cost, be it regulation, energy, or otherwise. And at the butcher shop, that's starting to bite. We're trying to tackle the wrong issues. We've got to look in Australia, in agriculture, at a value chain. If we only look at one part of the chain, the rest of the chain suffers. If you invest up at this part of the chain, inevitably it helps farmers.
No, you want to see a balanced approach, don't you?
If you only invest at that end of the supply chain, they can't push any benefits up. All they can push up is the amount of raw material that they still can produce in 1,000 acres or 2,000 acres or 10,000 acres. So that's what we've got to be looking at, innovation and technology, but we've also got to be seeing good, strong policy and also tackling red tape and regulation.
Well, policy, it gives you certainty, doesn't it? And allows you then to go forward and find that sort of investment that will drive some of these changes.
You would know better than me, over the last 40 years in watching politics in this country, how we have changed in the way in which we operate as a nation. And now, all of a sudden, when an industry like ours, the sheer size of investment, the sheer size of GDP, of growth, of economy, into the 20 plus billions, and we can't even get a seat at the table. And when they talk about energy, it's not the fault of the farmers, but they ask the farmers about energy policy for the supply chain. We've got to start talking to all of us.
If there were three things you could tell to the key players, what would they be? If you addressed the government right now, what would you want from government?
Firstly, what we would want is the value chain analysis.
Okay.
Do you understand the total process gate to plate? Do you understand all of the key intricacies that go in it? And then do you have a plan for its 1, 5, 10, 20-year future? Because as industry, we do. But if you don't want to follow with our plan, or our plan for some reason doesn't follow with yours, then in fact, we have an impasse.
So what do you say to Labor, who are contemplating being the next federal government if the chips fall their way, or indeed if the votes fall their way?
Certainly, the first thing I would say is it's been a good start. It's been a good start at actually sitting down and looking at it. Yep. Secondly, we are not, as the red meat industry, we're not actually agriculture. We're manufacturing. Start looking at it from that point of view. We are the largest exporting manufacturer in the country. If you start recognising that, then we can work on issues that relate to things that Labor hold dear. More local jobs, having more locals work in our facilities.
Plenty of things that we need to address. Let's do it again. Let's find another opportunity as we get closer to the federal election, and let's see if people are indeed listening. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Patrick Hutchinson, thank you for joining us on the Daily Brief.
Thank you, George.
Good on you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.